Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. I'm your host, John Light, President and CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting, and today we're joined by the Vice President of Product at ShipHero, Yosef Haas.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me.
You and I kind of connected indirectly through one of my team members, and in our original conversation, I thought you had a really fascinating story of how you ended up at ShipHero and the progression you've shown there. And I was wondering, as we get started, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about your background and your journey to get to where you are today.
My background, I was a computer nerd as a kid, very proudly, and, started as a programmer, was working in the city in Manhattan, about 2004, and childhood friend of mine, Aaron, who is the CEO of ShipHero, approached me because he had a e-commerce company selling martial arts equipment. And I had done some work, a little bit of programming on the side for him. And he asked me if I wanted to come on full time to, basically just write code. In those days, there was no real good e-commerce platform, available like there is like Shopify or BigCommerce today. So there was like, Yahoo stores and a few things like that, but nothing that was really what most people needed. So if you wanted to sell online, you either built your own or used, some open source software, something like that, which they were using at the time. So I ended up coming on about 2004 and was there for a long time, ended up writing a full e-commerce platform, actually still in use today, and as well as a warehouse management system. So, we had our own warehouse, needed something to manage, pick, pack, ship the orders. So ended up writing that software. And that kind of led eventually to ShipHero in 2012, thereabouts, where I think at that time we were kind of figuring we really needed something else. There's a time where you get to the point where building something in-house just doesn't really scale, doesn't really work as well anymore. And, Aaron was looking around kind of at the market and saw that there really wasn't a good warehouse management system for somebody who didn't want to spend, six, 7 figures. And so that's kind of how the idea was born for ShipHero. And Aaron started ShipHero. I wasn't actually too involved at the beginning, but then around 2015, I moved over to ShipHero full time. And that's where I am today.
You've been involved with your childhood friend, building a platform, building a business since 04, 05 time frame.
Yeah.
Man, so you've seen in that time frame, you would have had to see just about every technology iteration there is to look at. Because when we look at tech, we tend to grab our phones, right, and look at them and say, well, okay, it's smart, it does all this amazing stuff. But you saw it when it wasn't so smart.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty cool because you've had a chance. In my opinion, technology is always built on layers. There's a foundation that you build on, and that serves as foundation for the next step, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of people today who've entered the workforce don't really understand how it all came together. And so they lack an appreciation. Like when I got into the recruiting business as a headhunter, we'd still fax resumes. I knew a guy who still couried them. So he'd curry these resumes over with a courier or mail them. And I'm like, holy smokes, I can't imagine doing that. I had a request from a client just yesterday. Can you go ahead and check references on a candidate? Yeah, absolutely. Had the reference list, turned the team loose on it. And in not even 24 hours, we turned around 4 references, complete check, contact information, supervisory references, the whole kit and caboodle, and had it in their hands, and they'd reviewed it and they're over the moon. It used to be, if you wanted it that fast, you'd either have to go down the hall and deliver it because they were in your office building or around the corner, or you had to pick up the phone and review it with them verbally. And business has just changed so much because of the speed of things and the interdependencies we've grown from those foundations and keep developing the next foundation. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how it is today? And it could be from the ShipHero perspective, but from a talent perspective as well, what could some of these newer people coming into the market focus on in order to get a little more perspective and context on how great things are now versus, like you said, in the early 2000s, you had to build it from scratch.
Yeah. It's a different world. At that time, what you built your website on and how you built it could be your competitive advantage. And SEO was like a huge thing then. And that kind of made the difference between, where you're going to be successful in e-commerce or where you're not going to be. Totally different world today. In many ways, the e-commerce platform is a commodity. Anybody could go to Shopify, sign up and have, a world-class website very easily and, fairly cheaply, no worse than, the biggest brands in the world. So yeah, being able to launch the e-commerce part of it is easy. That's almost an afterthought. Now it's marketing, right? It's getting your name out there, whether it's, in social media and all the influencer marketing and all the different platforms available today. So it's a very different world in terms of what is actually important and what do you need to focus on. And I think, for people looking for jobs now starting out, we're seeing a major shift now as well with the AI tools available.
Right.
Newer, a lot of the things that you had spent a lot of time on, even a couple of years ago, you don't have to anymore, or, that time is cut dramatically. So I can't tell the future. I don't know where it's going. But it's definitely changing. It's like a changing period right now. It changes kind of stable for a while, with some minor changes, but now it's almost like a revolution and what's going to be important. If you ask me in 5 years from now, what is an entry-level person who's coding, what's going to be, what are they going to work on now? What are they going to work on first? I don't know. That's very different today than I think it will be in a few years. So it's an exciting time, but it could definitely be a nerve-wracking time for somebody who's just starting out and trying to figure out what should I be focusing on.
Absolutely. I had a great conversation with a fellow just a week or so ago where we talked about revenue operations and revenue enablement. And in that context, one of the things that struck me is that companies need people who have a very holistic view of a business and they understand what levers can be activated to drive revenue. Because how profitable you are, your profit margins are really irrelevant if you don't have the top line stuff coming in, right? So you've got to have that. It has to be robust, it has to be healthy. But how do you drive it? Is it marketing? You're out there fighting for attention all the time. That's the frontier right now in a sense. Is it sales, which are often considered two separate functions? Is it delivery? Is it customer success? What is that magic formula? Well, I would think from company to company and industry to industry that varies, and market to market. That can be radically different, even in the same market segment. But what this gentleman posited to me was, hey, look, there are about 16 or so levers that can be used if a person really understands the business from front to back. And so there's going to be an increasing demand for companies that get these people coming up in their careers who have a much broader view of the business than just their little silo. And that's one of the things I like about your story, is you've had a chance to come up through the ranks while all these evolutions were going on. And this is probably the most intense, because we can see, well, with fax machines, we didn't have to courier stuff. And with email, we don't have to fax stuff. Thank goodness. Thermal paper is a pain in the neck. And so on and so forth. And now we got to this point where things are so instant and so immediate. The war is not necessarily about the technology. Sure, it's about the application of the technology for most people. Most of us aren't going out competing with LLMs. We're competing with each other, be it for talent, be it for market share, whatever it is. But it's really about, can you run your business more effectively and efficiently than the other people? Yeah. And I don't know how companies are going to address that. And maybe you've got some thoughts on it, but to me, it seems pretty critical that you have somebody who can excel in an area, but they've got to be pretty good in all these other areas too. to really have a value impact.
As you touched on before, it's almost an impossible thing to know right now. It seems like every day there's another mind-blowing, new AI feature. So, who will that affect and how will it affect it? It's certainly hard to know. I mean, I think what we are seeing is not only understanding the product better, but really understanding who your market is. So, marketing, and that's certainly nothing new about that. But even within your customer segment and even your current customers, like what we find is always hard. You release a new feature. How do you get people to actually try it? How do you get your actual current customers to try it? Not even like new customers. People are used to something. If they don't want to change or they don't necessarily see the value in some new feature, how do you get them to try it? And then, whether that's product marketing or training or whatever, things you can do, that's certainly a big challenge. So yeah, it's not only expanding your current market, but even just addressing the market you have, getting people to appreciate a new feature, understand the value of a new feature. And especially as, in our journey in ShipHero going, we've been building it for a while already. So a lot of the features are more advanced. Getting people to sit down and understand the new feature and the value and it might be an advanced feature, that takes time. It's not a given. It's not a given that you're going to release something and someone's going to say, oh, that's great. I totally want to use it. You have to kind of convince them that they want to use it.
You think technology is moving faster than the speed of business right now?
Oh, right now, absolutely. I mean, you can see that just based on the number of, and again, right now it's all AI, right? AI is in the world right now. I don't think we quite know yet what's just, the marketing and what's actual useful, but there's so many. I mean, just look yesterday, I think Facebook or Meta came out with this feature to highlight and track individual people in videos, like in real time. So you can say, track this one person, and throughout the whole video it tracks. And it's just mind-blowing demos that people do. So how is that going to be used? And what's the actual business case for it? And what current job is that going to disrupt? I don't know, but it's definitely going to do something. So it's definitely ahead of the business use for it. Absolutely.
Well, we're seeing a lot of disruption in job descriptions. So I read, oh my gracious, the where the study was is escaping me, but it was just last year, 2023. We're talking about if you took a finance analyst job from 5 years prior and compared it to current day, there was over a 20% difference in the actual jobs.
Wow.
But most companies' descriptions don't reflect that yet.
Right.
And I just wonder, at what point does technology get so far ahead of how fast we're going to make decisions and commitments? I mean, to your point, we have this crackerjack new function. We just rolled out this new feature and we think, it's worth a premium and it's going to cost X on top of what you're already paying. But look at what it does. And somebody looks at that and goes, well, am I willing to risk my career or my promotion or my whatever to try out this, beta test this?
Yeah.
Or is it going to cause a snarl in my just-in-time inventory system so that I'm left a big blubbering pile of tears? And I could understand some intrepidity in that it takes time for adoption, for people to go, okay, I get it. How do I absorb this and use it? I really think I've been saying this for a while. The frontier is not necessarily in the LLM space, because AI, generative AI, but machine learning and deep learning, all these things have been out there in the ether and in the I guess you could say the mental horizons of the people who work with it for decades. We just now, though, got the computing power that makes it possible. Right. And so there's this big rush to say, okay, can we turn theory into reality? But then the big question is, what do we do with it? To your point, I think the frontier is, how do we apply this?
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure to your point either. How's it going to disrupt jobs? Because if you went and say you asked your AI to order a sub sandwich for you, it may know what you like, but what are the odds it's going to get the wrong order? I mean, you don't ask it to make that decision. You ask it, tell me what my decision maybe ought to be and why, and then I'll pull the trigger on it. And I just wonder how that's going to translate, because I don't know. And I really think, too, when you look at the job market and you came up, you were coding. You're probably hardcore. You probably spent a lot of nights. You probably invested in really comfortable chairs, or whatever it might take to get there. But nowadays, people don't have to do it that much. But they still have to know how it comes together, what good looks like, the right questions to ask, because you still got to backstop whatever AI might do, or whatever platform you're building on.
Yeah, and I think it's just the speed at which things seem to be evolving that makes everything so hard to really predict. Because today, using Copilot, whatever coding assistants they have, you can code faster, right? You still need to understand what you're doing. You still need to understand what it's supposed to do. You still need to be able to check for issues and errors. But it just cuts down the time it takes to get from zero to actually something that works. But that's today, in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, will that be 100 times better? I mean, I wouldn't bet against that.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against it either.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a losing bet.
Yeah.
I just worry about that we lose sight of what got us here. I had a really interesting conversation a couple of years ago with a gentleman involved in international trade. It wasn't a podcast, it was just a conversation. And he was talking about how the United States is in a really interesting position because we really spearheaded, Britain did too, and there's a few other countries really spearheaded the Industrial Revolution. And we understood, and maybe not as much now, but we understood manufacturing and industrialization at its core level, its core foundation, all the way up. Because you can't go produce a chip, for example, if you don't have the right facility to do it in, the right tools and the level of precision. I mean, even the floors have to be a certain way within very strict tolerances. And, if you look at an engine in an early model car, heck, go back 50 years compared to today, the tolerances are so much tighter. And it took decades and generations to build up to that. And we're going from AI at probably 1. We already went 0 to 1, let's just say from theory. We're going to this pragmatic or practical side, developing and using it. And we're trying to go from 1 to 100 like that in less than a generation. And I worry strategically about where does that leave us if somebody pulls the wrong block out of the Jenga tower.
I forgot who said it, but somebody pointed out that, if they went back to today, they said, we're going to build the Apollo shuttles, or, the Apollo ships that went to the moon exactly how they were built. They couldn't do it. There's just, that has been, that understanding has been lost. Now, I don't know, maybe that's not true. Maybe somebody could, but certainly it would probably take longer to do that in the way it was built back then than it would be just to build it, with modern technology. So that I totally agree with. That kind of core understanding gets lost because you don't need it anymore. I guess the question is, does that really matter? I mean, we couldn't build the Apollo mission, but we can build much more advanced ships that could land themselves. So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting.
It's an interesting thing, but
question,
to build those more advanced ships, we first had to build these others.
Yeah.
There was a critical pathway, a critical journey we had to go through to develop and evolve in that understanding of how do you do this. It's a gentleman I interviewed last year, really, really, he's a polymath. I don't know how else to put it, but we're talking about why he moved to Idaho from where he was here in Texas. And his wife got a job offer. And she was a nuclear scientist or a nuclear engineer, I forget which. And he said, but I'm really lucky. I'm married. He said, not to a rocket scientist, but to a nuclear rocket scientist. Now, she's helping design nuclear rocket engines for a Mars shuttle.
Wow.
Who would have thought that in terms of the technology it takes to get there? But we first had to go through, how do we harness nuclear power safely? How do we make it efficient? How do we not end up glowing? Glowing is very bad. I wouldn't want to glow. So I sit back and go, man, it's intriguing, it's fascinating, and someone like you sat kind of in this great position for observation on how we get to where we are today. Now, granted, your experience is really focused around ShipHero and your software platform that you played a huge role in. But if you were to go sit down and develop it from scratch today, I bet it would be a whole different program for you to complete.
Question is, will AI kind of skip over a lot of that natural progression? And what's the impact of that? Because yeah, you're right. We did have to go from building blocks and from that first space mission to the more advanced ones. Does AI in some ways skip a generation? And that, what is the impact of that?
Yeah, I think we got to look at what is our futurists, I think they're called, about, where is this going to lead? I think we all have some ideas. I don't think it'll ever happen on the pace that maybe someone like L. Ron Hubbard or Isaac Asimov envisioned, right? It's going to be off into the future. But it's fascinating to me because of how it impacts critical path talent needs to take. I've got my oldest daughter, when she graduated from college, she didn't really have, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you had a pretty defined career path for most majors that you saw coming out of college. And hers was kind of amorphous. And I think a lot of that is just that the market has changed and what people expect out of entry level. It's the old, the saw that you see sometimes amongst recruiters when we get together and bellyache about the market and clients and candidates, that somebody hands you a job description and say, hey, they need 10 years of experience in, Acme software, whatever that is. And you present with this amazing candidate who's got 6 years of experience. And they're like, no, he needs to have 10. Yeah, but this is the guy who actually developed the software. It's only 6 years old. And it's like, there's this disconnect of what our expectations are. And I wonder how you said you've got a distributed workforce to a degree, right? And that you lead teams that you can't go actually poke. You can't put a finger on. You've got to work through Slack. You've got to work through video conferences and whatnot. And that's probably what that developed just over the past few years.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we do that and still help out the human element for these people who are coming along behind us who haven't had the benefit of growing with the technology?
Yeah, so we've always been, ShipHero's always been remote workforce, other than our warehouses. That's still the people in the warehouse. But everyone else has always been remote. Before COVID, obviously COVID for the whole world changed that. So for us, it's kind of always been the way we've done it. So we have Slack, we have different ways to communicate. We definitely try to stress being mindful about other people and not just slacking somebody, at any time. So trying to, and we have what we call our communication guidelines. So just try to give ideas on, here's the best way to reach people. Not everything has to be immediate, especially when you're making decisions as a group. If you're posting a question, you want a discussion, don't just get an answer and okay, we're done. Let other people get involved. Because as you said, you can't get everyone in the room necessarily and give everyone a chance to talk, especially when there's time zone differences and people's schedules are different. So you have to be mindful about it. You have to really know what the challenges are and how you're going to overcome them. I think it's the future. I know a lot of companies have kind of swung back to try to get people back in offices, and but like in my experience, and again, I don't have that much experience, just with one company. But it works. It can work. When every once in a while, I see somebody write something or post, remote work is less efficient. You can't build a company remotely. And I'm like, well, we did, so it's definitely doable. But you have to want it, and you have to go into it with a kind of a realistic understanding. And the people that you hire have to want it too. Some people need to be with other people. Whenever I interview somebody, I always talk about that. And, do like, especially somebody who's coming from in office job, are you prepared to be sitting at home all day, every day? Is that something you're okay with? That's something you have to be mindful of. And I think the kind of the incoming generation is more used to it in many ways. Obviously, just growing up on so much more communications through technology, and of course going through COVID and everything that came with that. So I think the newer people in the workforce are more prepared for that and more willing to do that. But yeah, definitely a lot of people who were in office for many years don't really want to sit at home all day.
Yeah, I know sometimes I miss the office because it was so stinking. It was inefficient to get there. But if you're training new people, and most of the situations I've been in, we had a bullpen with not the full walls, but the half walls, so you have line of sight, especially training recruiters or anyone in sales or biz dev. That's hugely valuable, hugely. But every search we've done in the past year, I'm going to guesstimate just off the top of my head, we probably have about a third of our candidate rejections where a candidate says, I'm not interested, boil down to it not being hybrid enough or not being remote.
Yeah.
And in some cases, these aren't junior people. These are senior people. These are folks who are directors and VPs, and they don't want to be in the office either. But it's going to be interesting. I think it's pretty novel, probably. You felt like it was really novel when you were doing it, and you had a very distributed workforce, and technology a decade or so ago was just getting to the point where it could more reliably support that. And now, I don't know, they have, I've read somewhere about this fellow getting fired because he had a little arm off to the side that would just nudge his mouse around randomly to make it look like he was engaged. Because companies, I've seen this for a decade plus now, companies will monitor your activity.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge opportunity for friction there, but I don't know what else you can do if you're not going to have people in your office, but if companies get too strack about it, if they're too grinding on it, they're also going to run a lot of those people off and force them to disengage.
For us, when we were starting, it was a game changer because we could hire people that were really, really talented, and instead of having we were in a suburb of New York, Rockland County. Who's going to come work there? Just getting somebody in office just wasn't realistic to get really high quality people. But if you're remote, you can be anywhere. All of a sudden that's not an issue. So for us, it was a game changer, and I think that's why we're such big believers in it, as we saw how valuable it was. And again, I guess if you have a big office building and thousands of people coming every day and that's already established, it's a little harder to kind of let go of that.
Right.
But yeah, I think most startups, I would say most calls I do with customers or other people, or at least a significant percentage, like they're home. Like you can just see by the background, like they're not in an office. I'm almost surprised when I see a few people around the conference table. Like, oh, okay, they're actually somewhere together. So maybe it's just the types of businesses we deal with and the industry, but most people I deal with are remote now.
It's just so different, because I predate you in terms of getting out of college and going to pursuing a career. And I'm just always fascinated by it, because I remember when I came out of school, we worked in Excel and we worked in Lotus, and we went to a computer lab to get to the desktop, and we could toggle between different operating systems. And, I thought it was the bomb, but that was you had your half hour, your hour, whatever it was. And I was getting an accounting degree, so I spent a lot of time in spreadsheets. I get my first job. I'm sitting in front of this cathode ray tube, and it's all DOS based. I'm like, where's my mouse? Turns out we're using WYSIWYG, and what you see is what you get. And man, talk about leaving me baffled. Thank goodness. I think just a few weeks later that changed and went to something that actually was, for me, more workable. But I'm always shocked at how there's a fulcrum of a very small group of people in technology that are shifting how we work. And it used to be a much larger group of people. It used to be telecom. It used to be almost, it started off with the utilities, because you had to get electricity to people. And then telecom comes along, and now you come along and you end up getting email and e-commerce, and you start driving. SEO becomes a thing, and you're starting to drive business, evolving how you market. There are still people who build great businesses going door to door in an office building with donuts and shilling for business.
Right. Right.
There are a lot of people though who make good livings at their home, doing marketing or doing fractional work, or like with you being part of, say, a team developing a software platform and growing it, maintaining it. So I don't know where the song and dance is going to end, but I do think we're probably in one of the most ripe times in the last century for entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
For ideas to take hold and to gain momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it all the time with these brands that just explode on social media, whether it's TikTok or, one of the other ones. And they can go from almost nothing to like these big brands almost overnight. And then I think the challenge is keeping that, because everything is very, very quick in and out. But there have been brands that have built up on that and are able to do it, able to make the transition from kind of this phenomenon to an actual brand that runs. But yeah, you see it all the time with people who they didn't even plan it that way. Like that wasn't even their goal. They're just kind of doing their thing, and something hit, became viral, and all of a sudden they have something.
And boom.
So definitely a very different way to kind of build a business than it used to be.
Let me ask you this, and I don't want a trade secret or anything, okay? But you're sitting here, VP of product, you hire people, you deal with talent, you deal with a variety of people, I'm sure, in the role, internally and externally. What have you all found? And let me preface this. The reason I'm asking the question is because there's going to be some people who listen to this or listen to some of the shorts we carve out who are really interested, who are struggling in the job market. They're job seekers. They're having a hard time. What have you all found are the best channels to find the talent that you need to drive ShipHero forward?
So, I mean, referrals is always a huge one. Just internal referrals, kind of having that first like stamp of approval that somebody knows this person and they're at least something, they're quality.
Right.
So yeah, certainly like referrals, whether it's internal or just through your network. And a lot of what we do is also just kind of blind reaching out to people. So we see somebody in the industry, somebody who knows the business, and just reach out to them. And we made a number of pretty big hires just by contacting someone, whether LinkedIn or some other way. And you'd be surprised, people, they may be happy, but they may be looking for something new. They may be looking for a different challenge. They may, just kind of want something different. And, I guess, with that, obviously it's a little harder to find, who the real person really is. Like we do a lot of referral, just talking to their referrals, trying to do like backdoor referrals. So not just who you told me to talk to, but, someone who may know you. And yeah, for us, a lot of it is kind of that, is a person a good fit? It's not necessarily their technical abilities. Obviously that's really important too. But especially with like a remote team, like we said, you don't get to see the person. You don't really know how the person's working. So there's a lot of trust as well. We've had to let people go because we, after a while, realized they weren't actually doing anything. And we're not checking their keystrokes or their mouse movement, but after a while, you kind of see that they're not producing. You have the overworked crowd who try to work multiple jobs. We actually had at least one person doing that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of it is kind of that trust in the person. And so knowing the person, talking to them, speaking to their referrals, is a huge part of it. So again, obviously the technical side and whether they can actually do the job is big. But them as a person is almost as important.
Yeah, you got to be aligned and pull the wagon in the same direction. Okay, I have one more question. And I mentioned this earlier before we started recording. You got a telescope behind you.
Yes.
Is that a telescope that's there for show or is that for use?
Yeah, I do use it. I would call myself an amateur astronomer. I don't think I've even graduated to the amateur level. But yeah, it's more. I enjoy it. Unfortunately, I don't live in a very dark sky area, so it's not as as grand as maybe some other places. But yeah, I do try to look at every once in a while. Look at the moon, see the detail, different planets. So it's not any special telescope. Gives some good visibility, but
hey, it gives you something that's cool. In my opinion, I mean, you get a close up of the moon and start looking at the details, especially when you got little kids with you or something. That's just fascinating. And of course, we're always looking.
If you take a regular pair of binoculars and look at the moon, you'd be surprised at how much detail you can actually see with just a regular pair of binoculars. So, give it a try. You don't need anything like that even. That's not anything really fancy, but regular pair of binoculars, you can see some pretty interesting detail.
Nothing wrong with that. If we just had a telescope or a pair of binoculars to tell us what's going to happen here next year or the year after and that sort of thing, I think I would be pretty thrilled. Yeah. Yosef, thanks so much for joining me today here on Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, man. I really appreciate it. I like your story. I like what you're doing at ShipHero. I think you bring a lot of context. And I think that talking about how you all acquire talent and that it's heavy on the network and the referral and just networking, if you will, that's kind of no school, like the old school mentality and a market era right now where people think, well, I'm just going to apply to everything. And I'm going to send this. I'm going to use AI to customize all these cover letters. And nothing still meets having two humans in a loop make the connection and resonate. And so it's great to hear that affirmation.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm sure you know, you put out a job posting and in an hour you have like 100 applicants. So like, how are you supposed to go through 100? It's just there's so much activity that you need kind of a different way to find the right person. So I appreciate you having me on, John.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabretooth. Sabretooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.